Hey friends, welcome back to another Monday morning watercolor tips video. My name's Emma Lefebvre, and here on this channel on Monday mornings, I give you watercolor tips to start you off for the week. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about the importance of a value scale and how to use it and how these skills can help you in your paintings. So let's jump right in and start. Okay, so today we are talking about the importance of using values in our work. So using dark values and light values and medium values. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, when I say value, I am referring to the darkness or the lightness of a color. So let me just give you a really quick example. Dark value is a really nice saturated color like this. And a light value would be this watered down. So using more water than paint. Dark value, light value. Okay. So our dark values tend to have more paint than water, and our light values have more water than paint. And what this does, using this in your work, is it creates a lot of depth. It creates, something interesting for your viewers to look at. If everything painted on your paper is the same value, the same darkness, or the same lightness, it can give an effect. It can make it look really, really bold or, really, really light and airy. But at the same time, it could be a lot less interesting to look at. So an example of this would be when I do my berries. So if you guys saw my recent tutorial or short on painting my watercolor berries, I change up the value when I'm painting them because I find it just looks more interesting. So here I have a darker one, right? This is quite saturated with red. I'm going to do another saturated one. Boop. And then another one. And then I'm going to wash off my brush completely. And I'm just going to touch those ones. Oops, that made it too dark. Take up some of that. Okay, so we have some lighter ones. This is just a technique I use when I paint my berries sometimes. So we have the difference of the dark berries and the light berries. And it just makes it look a little bit more interesting rather than having dark berry, dark berry, dark berry, dark berry, dark berry. You know what I mean? It just gives it a little bit, I don't know, just makes it, in my opinion, it just makes it look cooler. So, sorry if I'm not too technical with my words today, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. Just kind of giving your eye a little bit something more interesting to look at. So today we're going to be practicing a couple skills and a couple exercises of how to use the value scale. So the first thing I always do, with my beginners, which I tell them is, and I'm mixing this color just because I'm really digging this color today, this cobalt blue and dioxazine purple. The first thing I like to do is try a value scale 2 ways. The first one is to get a really nice saturated version of your color, put it at one end. Then you are going to dip your paintbrush in your water, run it against the side, swatch another one, dip it, run it against the side, swatch it. Run it against the side, swatch it. And you're just going to slowly start working to a lighter value. You're just removing some of that pigment till you get to the lightest value possible. You can really take some of that off like that. Okay? That's one way to get from a dark to a light value. Another way is to just start with your color at one side and then just keep going till it kind of runs out of color. Okay, so there's different ways you can practice this. Now this isn't as saturated at this end. You can always add a bit more. There's that, and then there's also, actually let me just show you kind of another way to do it. Just really like this color today. Okay. So you start with a really, really saturated version at one end, like that. And then wash your brush off completely. I'm just washing it off in my jar over here. And then just tap it just a little bit so it's not too wet. And then you're just going to drag it this way. And that's another way to get a dark to light kind of gradient. of the value scale. Okay, so these are really good exercises to practice, because if you watch my tutorials, you'll know that a lot of the times I say, today we're going to start with a light wash. And what I mean by that is starting with a light value, because in watercolor, you can always make things darker, but it's a lot harder and sometimes impossible to make things lighter. So we always want to build up those shadows by doing layers, so starting light to dark. And if you don't know how to get to those really, really light values to start, you're going to have trouble. I know a lot of people have told me that it just is too dark. They're having a hard time making things light. So I want you to work on the value scale of starting with the dark, washing your brush off in your water, and then just doing lighter swatches. You can do it this way, where you just start and then you just keep going until you run out of color. Or you can start with your darker wash off your brush completely, so it's just water, touch the bottom of it gently, and just kind of pull it down, okay? So those are some ways that you can practice the value scale. Then if you want to actually just kind of practice just making a light wash, which is also really important. So we have a really saturated version of our color right there. What you're going to do is you're going to wet up your brush, make sure it's completely clean, and you're just going to touch it gently, just a little bit. So you have a little bit of that color on your brush, and it can get you right to a lighter value. And a lot of times, if you watch my tutorials, you'll see that my brush may already be very saturated, and then I'll just kind of go like this. And I just kind of know, not how many switches, but I can just kind of get a feel once I've done it so many times of how many times I need to do that to get right to a lighter value. And then if it's still not light enough, say you make a mistake and it's not as light as you like, you can always take your paper towel, mop it up a little bit, and then try again. So it's not always lost. So that's a really good exercise to do. So one painting that I love doing that really highlights the value scale is working kind of like on a mountain painting. I could suggest to get painter's tape, and do a nice border, but we're just going to play with it today. It's not going to have a nice border. So I've done this painting before on my channel, but I'm just going to kind of run through it quickly. This is going to practice layering and, again, working with values. The first thing we want to start with is a really light value for the sky. So again, my brush is just completely wet and it's clean. I'm just going to take a really light wash, just touching it a little bit, even adding a bit more water on my brush, just because we're going to be doing quite a big background here. See how I'm already running out of water and color? And we're just going to do a really, really light wash. So using a very light value for a sky. Now with this exercise, you're going to need to allow some drying time, because we're going to be layering wet on dry. So we need this to be dry. So I'm going to dry it quickly with my heat tool, and then I will be right back. Okay, now that it's dry, I know it's like super light. It's like almost barely there, but that's kind of what you want. You're going to work on creating the next value shade up. So you're working light to dark. So we have our lightest here. We're just going to add a little bit more color on our paintbrush. Again, some decent, not a lot of water because we're not doing a whole background, but we're going to be doing the next layer. Just grabbing a little bit more, and you're just going to do some mountains. This actually might be a little bit darker than I wanted, so I'm just going to wash off my brush a bit, just add more water to my brush, and just kind of move it around. We're just doing some mountains and just kind of drag it down. Okay. Now we're going to let this dry, and we'll come right back. Okay, so that's dry. Now we're just going to take up a little bit more color, maybe swish it around there a couple more times, and you're just going to do another set of mountains. Just grabbing more paint again. And this is one of the easiest paintings you can do working with a value scale, but also super beautiful that you can just, display in your home if you wanted to. Okay, so we have another darker set of mountains right there. And now I'm going to need to mix some more color for our next set of mountains. And you can keep going as long as you like. You can just layer upon layer upon layer. I'll probably do 2 more layers and then we'll be done. But you just keep going. There's our next layer. Let that dry. And then I'm just going to mix a bit more for our final layer. I might actually go a little bit more heavy with the purple just so it's darker. Okay, and then this one I'm just going to do kind of, also because we're layering, it's going to be a bit darker. Just going to do down here, and then we might do some trees or something. Just doing some really rough tree-ish shapes. Like that. But look how beautiful that looks. Okay, so now that you've practiced the value scale, keep practicing and keep an eye out for in my videos, and you notice how often I talk about using different values and the importance of it in all of our pieces. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching my video. I really hope you liked it and I hope you learned something. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and follow me on all my other platforms for tons more content. Have a wonderful day. Bye.